Apostrophe CMS Onboarding Series, Creating Pieces. Part 2, Displaying Pieces with Widgets and Relationships. In the first tutorial, we looked at creating a piece type and also creating dedicated piece type pages to display them. Obviously, we also want to be able to display pieces on other pages throughout our site. One way this can be accomplished is through the creation of a widget that can be added to any area. First up, we're going to create two different widgets, a simple one to display any review article, and a more complex one that allows the content creator to select from either a featured review or the latest review. In the last part of the tutorial, we will look at two ways to display pieces in the footer of our site. Along the way, we'll look at some new schema fields, including the relationship field, and an additional way to add markup to our pages using async components. You can follow along with the tutorial to modify your own project, or to see the progress of the project while following this tutorial, switch to the sec 2-5-pieces branch of the Apostrophe Onboarding Project repo on GitHub, linked in the comments below. Let's start first with a simple widget that will allow the content creator to add any review piece to the page. We won't be using this widget in our project, but it will be useful to build in order to introduce a new schema field and how it is used within a template. After construction, we'll add it to the default page area to see what it looks like. As with most of our custom modules, we'll use the CLI tool to create our widget. As we have seen in past tutorials in the series, this command will create a modules all reviews widget folder and populate it with an index.js file and a views folder with a widget.html file. After creation, we'll need to add it to the app.js file in order to instantiate it in our project. Next, open the index.js file of our new module and add the following code. Again, I'm going to copy it from the written tutorial, paste it in, and then we'll walk through it. If you've been following this tutorial series, the Extend, Options, and Fields property should look fairly familiar. For this code, we are using a new schema field, the Relationship field. Note that the name of the field is prefixed with an underscore selected review. As we covered earlier in this series, this means that the data returned by this field is computed at the time of render. The WithType property identifies the apostrophe doc type that is connected to the field. If we wanted to connect to a page, we would use WithType at apostrophe CMS/any page type. In addition to the required and max properties, this relationship has two optional properties, builders and fields. The builders property takes an object containing a project object that can limit the data returned, exactly like the query builders covered previously. In this case, only the title, author, and underscore URL are being returned. The fields property works like the top-level property of the same name. In this code, we are adding two additional fields to collect a recommender's name and recommendation. As with the top-level property, the group property is being used to group the fields on the Extras tab. For the recommendation, we're using a string type input field, but passing it the optional text area Boolean property to convert it to a text area input, and a max property to limit the number of characters that can be added. You can read more in the documentation about the relationship field, like how to allow nested relationships with relationships, as well as the reverse relationship field and using if only one to limit data. Next, we need to add the widget markup. Open the widget.html file in the views folder of the module and add the following code. As usual, I'm going to copy it from the written tutorial and paste it in, and then walk you through the important parts. We are using an if within Nunchuck's tags to make sure that the content creator added the review and it hasn't been archived by checking the data.widget._selected review value. A relationship field will return an array with all the selected documents, so that array should have a length longer than 0 if at least one review has been added. Next, since we are only expecting a single document in the array, we are setting the review variable to the first item in the array. Within that review, we can access the additional fields through the underscore fields property. This allows us to add the recommender name and recommendation. The rest of the data coming from the review is accessed through the schema names directly. Finally, we're going to add this widget to the default page by adding it to the end of the widgets object. You can then spin the project up, add a new default page, and add the new widget in the main area to see what it looks like. With our simple widget complete, we're going to create an additional widget that will allow the editor to select and display featured or recently published pieces. We are also going to give the content creator the ability to select the number of reviews to add and a choice of whether to add an image. Again, we will start by using the CLI tool to create our widget. Next, we will open up the index.js file of the new module and paste in our code. The fields object should look fairly familiar. We are using two new field types, Boolean and radio. The Boolean field returns either true or false. For both, we are adding the optional toggle property. Without the toggle property, the Boolean input field places two buttons side by side labeled yes and no. The toggle property adds the string values for the true and false values to those buttons. It also changes the selected appearance from a colored dot to a change in the background color. Toggle also takes true, in which case the labels will still be yes and no, but the styling will change. In this code, whether the included image field is added to a schema is controlled by the value of the display single field. Note that even though we have added new labels to the buttons, the return values are still true and false. If display single is false, the final data object won't be included in the field. The radio field allows for the selection of a single choice out of a list of choices. The decision to use a radio versus a select field usually comes down to the number of choices, since the choices in a radio field will always be displayed. Otherwise, these two types of fields can be used interchangeably, including populating the choices dynamically, as we've seen in a past tutorial. For the last four schema fields, three are types we've seen before: relationship and select. The last, number, is an integer schema field. This takes whole numbers between the optional min and max values as input. There is also a float input field for the input of fractional numbers, but we're not using that in this project. We could also have used a range schema field for a slightly different UI. We're going to ignore the final section of this code that adds a component until we add markup to the views/widget.html file. I'm going to go ahead and open up the file and then paste in the code from the written tutorial. Then we'll walk through it. We are creating two chunks of markup that are enclosed in if-else conditional tags. The top section within the if provides markup for the display of a single review. In addition to testing if the image exists and setting the value of some variables for the image, it uses two nunchucks set tags to create blocks of markup. We could also have used a nunchucks macro to create these blocks. The first is for displaying the image. The second is for the text markup. This will allow us to place the image on either the left or the right. I could have used CSS Grid or other styling to accomplish this, but I thought it was a good place to introduce the idea of using set to define reusable markup. Within the top if conditional, there is an internal if-else conditional based on whether the text or image block should be shown first. If the image should be shown on the left, we place the image markup on the page first, which will put it in the first bootstrap column, and then the text markup block on the page second, so it appears in the second column. If the image should appear on the right, we simply reverse the order of addition of the text block and the image block. Note that we are using the nunchucks safe filter, otherwise the HTML would be output as a text string. The markup in the main else block takes advantage of the async component that we added to our index.js file. The apostrophe async component is basically an improved version of the nunchucks set blocks or macros that we used for the single review markup. The big improvement is that they are async, so they allow us to fetch data from the database or an API. The component is called from within nunchucks block tags using the apostrophe template tag component, followed by a string that supplies the name of the module where the component function is defined. In this case, the review widget, colon separated from the name of the function. We are passing it the optional with and an object that is used to pass data from the template to the function. We are passing 3 pieces of data from the widget schema fields to the component method: the category, time, and number. Switching back to the review widget index.js file, let's look at the actual component function. In the component method, we are first setting our criteria category to either an empty object if the category is all, or the category passed from the template. Not setting a criteria.category property will return all of the review piece documents, not just documents from a selected category. Next, we are adding a property to the criteria object isFeatured if the time schema field passed from the template was featured. This is getting passed into the find query initialization method of the review module. Remember that since we are in the review widget module, we can't just use self.find. We're using project to limit the returned information to just the title, category, and computed URL. Without the category, the computed URL would return the wrong parent page for each review. The sort query builder is arranging the reviews by their created at date in descending order, which means that the latest review will be first. The limit query builder is being used to only return the number of reviews specified by the user and sent from the template as data.number. And finally, we're completing our query by specifying that those documents should be delivered as an array of document objects, and then passing that object to our component markup. With the reviews fetched from the database, we now need to create the markup to display them. Create a modules, review widget, views, return reviews.html file. Note that this file name matches the method name and the name used in the views widget.html markup. Add the following code, which I'll paste in from the written tutorial and walk you through. Within this markup, we are creating a for in loop to step through each of the returned reviews. We are creating a link for each based on the computed URL and the title. If we wanted to alter this to include an image, we would have to change our project query builder. However, it is interesting to note that if we were to log the information being delivered to the component markup, we would see that there are several computed fields, including _ID, _parent URL, and _parent slug that can be used for creating navigation items, like a link to take the user to the particular index page that this review belongs on. If we were to spin our site up now, we could populate our homepage with our new widgets, but it wouldn't look quite like our final project because we still need to add some additional styling. Just as a reminder, the styling can be placed in several locations within our project. It could be placed into a UI source folder in our review widget module. This would require adding or importing the styles into an index.scss file within that folder. Instead, we can create a new file in the modules, asset, UI, source, SCSS folder, and import it in the index.scss file of that same module. Rather than adding the code here, I recommend copying the _theme-reviews.scss file from the sec2-5-pieces branch of the GitHub repo. Next, open the modules, asset, UI, source, index.scss file and add @import./scss/_theme reviews. Now with our styling added, our review widget would look better, but we still need to pick where to display it. Open the lib/area.js file and add it to the end of the full config object. Spinning the site up now will allow the addition of our new widget to any area that has a row widget. In the finished project, this widget was used in both the upper and lower homepage areas. Unless you have added content, including reviews and category pages for any review types, the links for this widget won't be correctly formed. That is because each review document depends on having a computed _parental URL to create the link. The Apostrophe admin UI styling is designed to be agnostic with regard to your project styling. In this case, the style sheet that Bootstrap is using to normalize or reset all of the base browser styling is causing a problem with the Apostrophe radio schema input field. The choices for where we want our image when we are displaying a single review piece are pushed off to the right side of the page due to a rule on the legend selector. To fix this, we need to add some additional styling. Open the modules, asset, UI source, SCSS folder and create an _bootstrap-fixes.scss file and add the following code. Next, open the modules asset UI source index.scss file and add an import for the new partial. To wrap up this tutorial, we will take a brief look at two final ways that we can use to display a piece without a widget or the direct need for a piece page. We're going to add a latest review to the footer using a component defined in the review piece module. We are going to add a featured review in the same section of our footer using a relationship field in our @apostrophe CMS global module. Let's start with how we can use a component. Open the modules review index.js file and add the following code after the existing code. I'm going to copy it from the written tutorial and paste it in and then walk through it. This code is creating a latest review method that queries the review pieces to find the latest post and returns it as an object. Since we are in the review module, we only need to use self.find to restrict the returned documents to review pieces. The rest of these query builders should look familiar. We are sorting and then limiting the documents returned in order to get the newest review piece. In this case, we're going to use the toObject to return our document as an object rather than toArray. This object will be available in our component template as data.review. Next, we need to create markup to display the returned piece. Create a modules review views latest review.html file and add the following code. Again, I'm going to cut and paste in the interest of time. This markup will construct a link using the data.review object returned by the component method. It is also using a field, search summary, that is created when saving the review piece to the database. This is generated by the @apostrophe CMS search module and can be disabled if you choose. In this case, it's easier than adding an additional field to the review module schema and asking the content editor for a summary. This field will contain all the text added to the page, and we are using the built-in Nunchuck's truncate filter to just add the first 100 characters to the end markup. We still need to edit our footer fragment to display this component, but we're going to wait to modify this until we modify our modules @apostrophe CMS global/index.js file to allow the content editor to select a review. Thus far, we have used the modules @apostrophe CMS global module as a place to house our top bar translation strings. It is also useful for adding content that will be used throughout the site in multiple modules. The schema fields that are added to this module are exposed as data.global in the data object available to all page types and widgets. In this case, we are just going to add a single schema field to deliver a selected review. We will return to the global module to finish our footer in a future tutorial. For now, create the modules @apostrophe CMS global index.js file and add the following code. I'm going to paste it in for the sake of time. This will add a single input field to our global configuration. This can be edited by the user by opening the menu located at the upper right of the admin bar. Again, since we are using a relationship type field, we need to preface our field name with an underscore. Finally, we need to edit our footer to display the component. Open the views, fragments, footer.html file and modify the second column that has the h2 tag with the text latest posts to include our component markup. For the latest review, we are outputting the markup from the component created in our review module. For the featured review, we are adding essentially the exact same markup and populating it with the information from the data.global object. Note that the underscore featured post field will return an array, so we have to access the first item in that array with underscore featured post 0. Even though this field is required in the global configuration, best practice would be to use an if conditional to make sure that the featured post document actually exists. Pieces are a powerful way to produce reusable content that can be displayed throughout your project. In this two-part set of tutorials on pieces, we created a piece type called review for our project. When creating our piece module, we looked at how to add localization strings for our custom module UI using the i18n property. This is slightly different from the localization that we did in the homepage top bar fragment in the Pages tutorial. We also examined multiple ways to display our new pieces. First, we created a piece page type with HTML markup to display individual pieces using the show.html template, and display multiple pieces using the index.html template. We utilize the Apostrophe pager module to look at how to limit the number of pieces displayed at once and create a breadcrumb trail for the display of the rest on our index page. We also looked at how we can have multiple index pages in our project, each with different pieces associated, by extending the filters by index page and choose parent page methods. This introduced the module configuration function extend methods. Finally, we looked at how you can add choices to a select field dynamically in order to keep the category choices the content editor can make up to date. Second, we looked at widgets to display our pieces. The newly created widget can display either a single selected review or a list of them. This led to the introduction of query builders for retrieving documents from the database from within our component. We also revisited getting schema info from the data.widget object. We completed this section by revisiting how to add style rules in our project. Third, we looked at how we can display pieces on our pages using a component defined within the original piece type module or through the global configuration. We modified the views/fragments/footer.html file that is displayed on each project page. In the upcoming tutorial, we'll focus on crafting the final global element for our page, the navigation menu. Our exploration will encompass a variety of approaches to achieve this, delving back into the global configuration. Moreover, we'll investigate various data objects accessible on pages, which play a vital role in facilitating navigation creation. If you have any questions about this tutorial or want more help starting your Apostrophe CMS project, please join our vibrant community in Discord. You can join right now by following the link in the comments. We hope that you will continue along with our tutorial series and subscribe to the other great videos in our channel.